Why do you say that, Father? You aren't afraid, are you?
No, but I respect some of the superstitions of others. Often they are founded in fact.
Broadcasting live from our Sanctum Sanctorum in Venice, California. This is the Sixth Sense Society. I'm your host, Krista, here with our producer, Michael. And today we have back on the show Caireann Frasca, who has been walking the path of the Celtic and Evelonian goddess for over 20 years. And today she's going to share her thoughts about the magic of Autumn Equinox, which is coming up next week. But before we get started, Michael has some announcements.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to our show. We're super excited to have Caireann back today. She's an awesome guest, and we have some great shows coming up. We have Anita Kamari next week doing some really cool astrology stuff. In October, we have some of our favorites back. We have Holly Lindblom from Holly's Haunts. We have Juan Milo Duquette back. In November he'll be back. We have Mystic Mitten. We have just all kinds of really great stuff coming up. We're going to have Jackie Smith back talking about Samhain. We're going to have Madame Zulema back talking about the Day of the Dead. So just all kinds of great esoteric stuff, all kinds of great occult stuff. So check us out. Get all the information on our website, sixthsensesociety.com, SIXTH. While you're there, you can buy us a coffee on Ko-Fi. It helps to cover some of our cost of producing the show. And if you can't afford it, we love to have you anyway. So this is definitely our passion project, and we're just happy to do it for you guys. And we're also available on a podcast. So if you're out and about, find us on Spotify or iTunes, wherever you get your podcasts. And with that, I'm going to kick it back to Krista, and take it away, Krista.
Great. Thanks, Michael. And welcome, Caireann.
Oh, sorry. I forgot to turn my mic. There we are.
Now you're on the air.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be back.
Oh, glad you can come back. And how have you been holding up?
Pretty well, all things considered, My friends and I always joke, how's the apocalypse going for you? But it's, out here on the East Coast in Massachusetts, we haven't been, we've certainly had our share of COVID cases, and but it's, managed quite well. And, everything else we're trying to get back to some sense of, I don't want to say normalcy, because who knows what that means anymore, but some sense of sort of predictable daily life, and just trying to hang in there and use the time for going inward. I feel like the dark half of the year came a little early this year. So it's been nice to have the time to really be quiet and introspective and reevaluate and things like that. So.
And that does lead us to our topic, the autumn equinox. And as it is going into the second half of the year, at least the northern hemisphere, it's getting darker, and it is associated with going within. So why don't you share with us some of your own knowledge of the autumn equinox in terms of its history?
Sure. This is one of my favorite times of year. So this autumn equinox has always been a special celebration for me, and sort of diving into the history of it. A few years ago, I learned that, so I tend to follow the Celtic path, and I thought that the equinox had always been celebrated by the Celts, but it was actually the Anglo-Saxons that celebrated the solstices and the equinoxes. So it was later adopted, in the neo-pagan community as a holiday called Mabon or Mabon, depending on how you want to pronounce it. And that name actually came from the son of the Welsh, she's a great mother goddess called Modron or Modron. And she gave birth to Mabon on the autumn equinox. And then 3 days later, or 3 years later, depending on the story and who's telling it, he's kidnapped to the other world, where he sort of goes back. The other world is symbolic sort of that womb space, that gestational space. And he has lots of time to develop his spiritual abilities and things like that. He also goes through lots of trials and tribulations, but ultimately he's reborn as the son of light. And so this idea of the light within the darkness is really encompassing of what autumn equinox means to me personally. It's a time, obviously it's a harvest festival. It's the second one in the Celtic calendar, the first being Lunasa or Lammas. Then you've got the autumn equinox, then you've got Samhain. So it's smack in the middle. And it's really about that balance of light and dark. We're now moving out of the bright half of the year and into the quiet, dark time. But we've got a lot of celebrating to do of all our hard work and, what we've been able to bring to fruition this year, even though we've had some challenges. It's a time for really being grateful for what we do have and what we've been able to produce and create.
I decided to go back, and it's been a long time since I've looked at some of my witchcraft books that I read when I first was getting involved in the witchcraft path. And I looked at the 8 Sabbats for Witches by Janet and Stuart Farrar.
Uh-huh.
And I'd totally forgotten a lot of the details. And one of the things I liked was when they talked about the autumn equinox was they say it comes before, in the tree calendar, the end of the vine month and the beginning of the ivy month, and which are the only 2 trees in the calendar. Again, these are the Celtic trees, I think, and which
Yes.
they grow spirally. And so it has to do with, it's a symbol of reincarnation. And I
Yeah.
like that idea. I said, oh yeah, that's really interesting. And they also, now this is something I was a little, I don't know what to think. Everyone always says that the veils are thin, the thinnest between May Day and sort of Samhain, but they were saying the equinoxes also are very connected to a lot of activity in between the worlds. And do you find that to be true?
Absolutely. Yes. So when you think of that expression, the veil being thin, there are thin places in the world where you go. Sometimes it's within a grove of trees. Sometimes it's where the sea meets the land on the coast. It could be a mountaintop where the earth meets the air. There are also thin times. And the equinox is one of them when you think about that sort of in between, where it's not dark but it's not light. And they do call those the thin times, or thin or in between times, and in between places. And those are areas and times where, yes, it's easier to sort of tune into the other world, to connect with ancestors, things like that. So yeah, I do agree.
It's interesting too that it's one of the equinoxes and solstices are probably one of the celebrations that also I think ceremonial magicians really participate in. So it's got a broad sort of, and of course now we're going into all the Jewish holidays, and there's a lot of, there's a lot of just celebration and ritual from many cultures, it seems like, around the equinox, the autumn equinox.
Definitely, definitely. It's one of those universal, when you think about it, it's a planetary thing. No matter where people were in the world, they could see what was going on in the sky. And of course, if you're in the southern hemisphere versus the northern hemisphere, it's flipped on either side of that. But I love how each culture and each tradition sort of created its own stories around what was going on in the sky and how that affected the people down on earth, and helped create a sense of connection with something much greater. So it's neat to see all the different versions of the stories around the equinoxes and the solstices, but it's also really cool to see all the similarities.
Mhm. So obviously, it can be simply a time of celebration and rituals around celebration, which is what their book talks about, the rituals that they would do. But if
Mhm.
I was to look at it in terms of just magic, and since it's got this PowerPoint of balance. What sort of magic do you think would be natural for the autumn equinox?
Oh, I think at this time, anything that you can do to work with the shadow, that's one that I think is it's particularly powerful beginning now and into, getting more into the darker months of the year. But that sort of light within, finding that light within the darker places within us. I tend to do a lot of work around that at this time of year. It's a really something about the energy, and the balance of the light and the dark really helps to support that work. So that's certainly one. Also, any ritual or meditation or spiritual work that you want to do around creating a sense of wholeness and balance in yourself, and in your community and the world around you, that is also the energy really supports that kind of work as well. Simple rituals of, I can do a simple ritual of, lighting a candle in a pitch dark room and meditating on, spreading that light across to everybody that I know, all through my neighborhood, all through the town, the state, the country, the world. Um, Work like that I find to be more powerful at this time of year.
So, having said, you sort of hinted at the beginning of this show, and I was going to bring this up, the idea that because of the pandemic, we have been in a descent cycle a little bit prematurely. Certainly, some people more than others that really fully isolated, and
Yeah.
how do you think that affects, going in now into the natural rhythm and cycle of the descent? Would it be something that you could go deeper? Would you want to maybe take a breather if you've been doing that? What do you think about it?
Hmm. It's a really good question. I think it could go either way depending on where you are and what you feel comfortable or have the energy for. This time has been really taxing emotionally on a lot of people, and they may just need to take a bit of a break and go back into, as we were talking about that story about Mabin and Modron, sort of go back into that nurturing womb space and rest. Just let yourself slow down. I think that when we were on lockdown, everyone was talking about, oh, it's this great opportunity to slow down and take a breath but people weren't really necessarily acknowledging the underlying stress of having your entire world upended in a matter of, I mean, literally days in some cases of suddenly life was, business as usual, and then suddenly it wasn't. And so, between the worries about the pandemic and the health of yourself and your loved ones, even just stress of like, should I even go to the grocery store? Should I have my groceries delivered? I have to wipe everything down. I mean, all these things start to compound and really like take up a lot of your energy without you even really realizing it. You might feel fine on the surface, but it's draining you, underneath. So if you're feeling like that, I highly recommend just really allowing yourself to rest. And when I say rest, take some time every day, or if you can block out a whole day, great. And just let yourself do whatever it is you feel like doing. If that's laying on the sofa all day long, reading a book, or just napping, do it. Make yourself some really healthy, nurturing food. Do that. Try to not think about all the things you ought to be doing while you're doing that. When you do that, when you're trying to rest, it really steals any of the benefit from it that you're going to get. So that's one side of it. I think for others, I oddly I was feeling very low energy and very tired all the time, and really, just exhausted from everything, not only the pandemic, but all the social unrest and the all the things that are becoming coming up to be healed in terms of racism and all the social injustice. We've got climate issues clearly, with the wildfires and everything. And it just felt like so much. And so I had to really slow down and be quiet for a long time. Now I find myself coming out of that, which is weird because this is usually the time of year when I'm like, time to go within, time to rest. Now I'm feeling more like I want to cultivate that light. I want to shine the light brighter. I'm feeling my energy coming back. So, to go back to the theme of this holiday, or this, the equinox, it's like, yeah, there's the balance, there's a dark and the light. I feel like I've been tilted more towards the dark, quiet side for quite a while. Now I'm tilting more towards the light side. So it's all about finding what feels right for you as an individual, I think, and just sort of going with the flow. In a week I might be feeling tired and needing rest again. So really pay attention, tune into how you're feeling. Check in with yourself every day and see what is it that I need today. Do I need more social interaction? Do I need quiet downtime? Do I need to work on that project, or do I need to just, binge watch a show on Netflix? Whatever it is that you need, give yourself permission to do it.
You know
These
what
are these
I
are times we've
realized?
never seen.
I realized after I was writing about the dates of the autumn equinoxes, we got our stay-at-home order in California right before the spring equinox.
Yes.
So you could reframe the definition of light and dark.
Mhm.
Light could be bringing light onto something. And so what happened during that time, we brought light onto the racial injustices even more so, and all the other things. The dark, which I feel gets demonized, can also be a place of renewal, like you were saying, and rest, and going sort of quiet so that you can regroup. And I think that there's a tendency, even in psychology, but no, not really. In pop psychology, there is. But if you look at Jung, and you look at in psychology, what the shadow is, it can be things that you repress that are good in you. It's not all this negative stuff, but I often find people want to talk about the shadow in that way. And to me, it's almost like dark is a form of racism. Like, why is dark bad?
Mhm.
Dark
Mhm.
can be beautiful. It's like, going to sleep at night, and recouping your energy, and ground that's not being used for a while and it's just fallow, it's just resting. And so I've thought about that for years, that we have these racial ideas within our lingo spiritually, and always being called a light worker. And I said, I don't want to be called a light worker. I don't understand. I want to be a good human being at this point anyway. So
Yeah.
that's what when you were saying, I was thinking, like, well, maybe we could reframe even light and dark. What is that about?
Hmm. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I feel like it's an excellent point, and I personally love going into the darkness, because to me it's pure potential. It's that again, that womb space where you really can go deep. You can excavate, there's treasure in there. It's like going into a deep dark cave, right? There's treasure at the bottom of that cave. And I do feel strongly that way. And you make a really good point about the language. And I would really love to go away and journal about that and see what comes up in terms of other ways that we could refer to it, because I think you're right. It has such a negative connotation. I think the dark also seems to have a more feminine connotation, whereas the light has a more masculine one. And so I can't help but think about the patriarchy that we live in, and how all things that are dark and mysterious and unknown, these unknown depths of the feminine are, we're sort of demonized and looked upon as, scary, or, must be controlled, all of that kind of thing. So that's coming up around this as well. So yeah, I'm gonna do some work on that.
Yeah, it's something I've thought about for years, actually.
Mm.
And again, going back to the concept of balance at the equinox, and we're also, moving into a period for Libra, which is associated with beauty and love, but also justice.
Mhm.
And seeking to understand the concepts, I think that might, what is justice, and how do we go about supporting the right approach to it in our own ways. So, for instance, not everybody has to be outspoken and an activist to contribute to healing injustices in life. And I think that gets missed sometimes. Like the feminine, one of the problems with the feminine inherently is it's invisible, it's one of its qualities. And when we're constantly asserting everything into the world, that's a masculine principle, which we have to do, of course. So, how do you assert the feminine and keep it feminine? You know?
Yes, another great question. And you're talking to a textbook Libra right here, so I'm
Ah,
feeling that.
all right then.
Yeah, I think it is one of the things that I personally have struggled with too. Is like, do I want to be out there on the front line screaming and shouting and raising awareness? That doesn't really feel like where I can be the most effective. I think that the a way to bring the feminine into this is in observing and creating what is next. So sort of using that creative energy, receiving the inspiration for, well, here's what's going on right now. We see a lot of the things that we've, looked on as solid for so many lifetimes are crumbling all around us. Our justice system, for one, to bring Libra back into it. The government, schools, the business world, like everything is just all in chaos. So now is a time, in terms of feminine energy, to be real quiet in the midst of all that and see what inspiration am I getting, what could we create next that's better and more equitable and more sustainable for all. The feminine is a we. It's a community. It's about the community. It's about the collective. So that's maybe a way that we can start doing some work around building what's next, or getting the inspiration to build what's next.
And that definitely suits the next part of the year, that idea of going down and resting. And as we know, that a lot of times when we're resting, we get some of our best creative ideas and contemplate, and it's all good. I've done it. I've done the activism. I've been fired for speaking up, and I've done complete retreat. And I think it's all about feeling what your soul wants you to do and being okay with what other people think about it. That it doesn't matter. All that matters is that you look inside yourself and say, honestly, what do I feel I can contribute right now? Well, maybe, my contribution is I'm going to take care of my family. Maybe my contribution is to be on the front lines with like some of those mothers, and it's all about, to me, just being connected to our contribution. I think that's why someone like John Lewis was so formidable and effective. He was so connected to what he was doing all the
Yes.
time. I mean, he it seems like he really found that connection early on.
Mhm.
And that's why he's also someone to look at in terms of as a human being. Like, okay, he got how to connect to what was true for his soul, I think. And he seems to have stayed pretty true to it throughout his life.
Yeah, yeah. I really think so much of him, and what an incredible human, and what a terrible loss for all of us that he's gone, but what an example he leaves. I think you're right. I think that he was guided. I feel like to use he was so connected to his purpose, which I feel like was coming to him from God, from the universe. He just followed what his heart told him to do. And I feel like that was being sort of divinely, he was so in alignment with what his mission was here as a soul. And that came through. And that's why it was like, in my mind, I feel like that's why it was so consistent his whole life. It was like he had this path, and I'm sure he had his moments where he, stumbled and didn't know what to do, but I feel like he always knew how to get back to it by reconnecting, by staying in alignment, and that kind of power, that's something I feel like a lot of people in positions of power right now in our world could really take a page out of that book. True power is allowing, yourself to be a vessel for the divine, and marrying your will and your ability to take action, your ability to share, your ability to be an example, with what the divine wants for you. And an easy way to know what that is to, like, what is that longing in your heart? What is it that you feel like, oh, I wish I could do X. I wish I could be out there doing Y. That's not in you by accident. It was put there. I firmly believe that. And when like you said, Krista, when you don't want to, you're going to stand up and for what you believe is right and not worry about what other people think about it. That's a power that nobody can take away from you. When you're in alignment like that and you really don't allow the naysayers to determine what you do, that's an incredibly powerful place to be and a place to act from.
Yeah, well said. I totally agree. And it does fit, all of this fits with the concept of the fall equinox. The idea I was thinking while you were talking of balance. So perhaps it's a good time to weigh in with yourself and see if you are in some sort of like inner balance. Like, do you find that there's a part of you tend to spend more time with? Is it some other part you've rejected, and for whatever reason? And then finding maybe some ways in which you can. I don't believe in perfect balance because it's not possible, but the idea that you're trying to at least be aware of where, like you said earlier, where we're out of balance, and also the idea that when you're talking about love and community, that this is a time where we're getting into Libra, which is ruled by Venus, and it's a good time to look at relationship in general. Like equinox kind of welcoming us through the door and saying, "Here, let's look at relationship."
Yes, for sure. And it is a perfect time for that because it's, we talk about the balance within, but there's also the balance of who you are in the world and how you are with your family and with your community. And, have you been more withdrawn? Could you, have the scales tipped that too far that way? Is it better to go, take some time now to be more available to the people that you love? So yes, it's all like it just all ripples out. And looking at how you are out in the world in addition to how you're feeling on the inside, as above, so below, as within, so without, right?
Yeah.
It's all connected.
So, talking about the community and relationship, what do you think of the idea of maybe some small groups of conscious people coming together on the equinox to do some magic for the world, like they did in World War II when they were battling in England? Dion Fortune and Aleister Crowley. Why not do that now, especially in the United States, and we know we're on the precipice of one of the biggest elections ever? What about doing some kind of community magic together, even with three friends? Or what are your thoughts about that?
I love that idea. I love that idea. And I think that the more people that you have focused on a similar intention, the more power you're lending it. So for sure. You got me thinking about that. There's an old legend about Queen Elizabeth I, when the Spanish Armada was invading, and the ships were on their way. They were coming, and there was just the Armada was massive. There's no way that England could have fought them off. And the story goes that all of the witches of England gathered on the coast and came together to stop to call up a storm. And that is actually what happened. The Armada got caught up in a storm and they never made it to England. And so, they were safe. And I just love that. I feel, I don't even want to say it out loud. Like, we're not in that situation right now where we've got anybody invading, but I think that there is a very real and present, there's a critical nature to this election in the States that I certainly haven't seen in my lifetime. And I think the more positive energy we can put around it, the more light we can bring to it, the less we get caught up in the drama and the hyperbole and the, just bombastic sort of coverage that's out there, the more we can stay focused on what it is we want to create, and bringing that, bringing a group of people together, of like-minded people together to add some energy and fire to that. Heck yeah.
Yeah, and maybe some of it can be more covert because we're going into the, sort of the underworld, and sometimes it's good to do things underground and surprise people. And but I was thinking about, I've been thinking about that more since we've had this situation, and said, why don't we do more of that? And I'm sure some people do. I'm sure there are groups that have been doing things on their own and not talking about it, because oftentimes it's better not to talk.
Yeah, yeah.
With
Well,
magic anyway.
yeah, there were a couple very public efforts made. I want to say it was, I feel like when it was when Trump was first elected, there were a bunch of people in the pagan and Wiccan community that came together and wanted to bind him, to do a binding spell, and it was all over the internet, and everybody, whoever wanted to participate did. And then there was another one recently, which was a global meditation to send healing for
Right.
after the pandemic started.
I saw that.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, I mean, everything helps. Every little bit helps. And if that's something people feel moved to do. I agree with the quieter approach that you mentioned and the sort of more underground approach, because I do feel like when you're broadcasting it like that, I feel like it takes a little of the power away from it. I don't know why, it just feels like it dissipates it somehow. And when you're opening it up to all and sundry, different energies can come in, different people with different intentions. And I think it could be more powerful with a smaller group of people that well and know what they're about. They know what you're about, and you can join forces that way. It's like a mini Avengers.
Yeah, and it perhaps has to do with the magic you're doing, because
Yes.
if I'm doing a magic that wants to really undermine a situation, it makes more sense to be silent, use the owl approach. And then obviously if I'm doing a magic that maybe is a healing for the world, then of course we can go ahead and put that out more. But one of the kind of shocks I have with modern day witches and pagans is how much spell work they do on their Instagram, and they show it all. And I think some of that, like I said, if you're doing like a little community thing, you want everybody to be better, great. But my personal magic, I think I'll keep it to myself, because I don't want to have anyone coming at me.
Exactly. I really wish for the day. It's funny because I feel like so much about witchcraft, the Wiccan religion, paganism has gone so mainstream. It's so, people talk about it so much more openly. Like you say, they're posting their spells on Instagram. And in a way, I feel like that's, on the one hand, I feel like it's good, because people who are seeking a different path will have a much easier time of finding it than, back even in the 90s. But I do also, on the other hand, wish that we could sort of go back to that old saying, one of the rules for witches is to be silent. Because I do think that there's just more power in it, and there's more, you can protect your work and yourself and everyone involved much better that way too.
It's true. I mean, I think you could say that about a lot of different spiritual paths, and it's a popular path. It's got a certain hype and sort of look now that is ironic. I remember someone had posted in their Facebook these pictures of, I don't know if it was in Finland, of these people that were witches, and they all looked like farmers. And they were real witches, and they did all the, everyone knew they did, and they did not look anything like modern witches. And I thought, that's so refreshing. I'm not
Yes.
against having a look. I'm not, but it's become a little too associated with that you look a certain way, when witches are in
Yes.
all cultures, and they're all classes. They're all, and particularly the poor class, because if you go back to the Gospel of Radia, that, if you have no other means to address injustices or get what you desire, you go and ask for it on the full moon. And she responds. And one of my friends that I had a long time ago, she says, why are there so many people that are, not well off in witchcraft? I said, well, because it's a way they can address these things powerfully. It's a way of finding power in a place where perhaps their power has been taken away from them unfairly even. So of course you're
Yes.
going to be appealing to lower classes with magic, and it works too. But I think it makes sense that you would, that would be what people that, or even middle class, people that don't have as much resources.
Yep. 100%. I agree.
Oh, so
It's
going back to the equinox, is there anything you would advise people not to do? Like, is there something that you feel, and again, not in a judgmental way, but what doesn't exactly work, do you think, with the equinox that you have done or you've seen done, or is it just a magical time?
gosh, I can't think of anything I would warn against per se, or say, best not to do this now. I do feel like it is a powerful time because it's an in-between time. And so, a word of caution, I suppose, particularly if you follow the Celtic path, or you're just, starting out. The other world is full of all sorts of beings, just like our own world. And sometimes I think of it like, you know, people who are unaware and sort of innocent, and like, oh, let's play with the Ouija board, and invite whatever happens to come through. Like, let's just invite that in. It's like leaving the front door of your house open all night, and just whoever could wander in, come on in. So, be careful. Obviously, take your precautions. Yeah, I don't feel like anybody's under imminent threat by anything, but I feel like just be smart about it. There's all sorts of fae in the other world. There's all sorts of other beings, and you just want to, make sure you know what you're doing, um, and don't go into it naively, or without preparing and without adequately protecting yourself.
So, for someone new to practicing magic or working with PowerPoints like the Equinox, do you have any books that you would recommend that helped you along the way?
Hmm. There's a great one. Oh, I wish I could. I think it's called The Magical Year. I cannot remember the author at the moment, but she actually goes through the entire Wheel of the Year, and has some absolutely wonderful. I believe she's a member of the orders of Bards, Ovates, and Druids over in the UK. And she has absolutely wonderful advice on not only celebrating, but rituals you can do, history. It's wonderful. So the Magical Year is one I would recommend. I also, this time of year, am always very drawn to going back to the Mabinogian, which is the old Welsh um, collection of tales of their mythology and legends. And it's a lot. I mean, it's an ancient text, so I don't always I don't always have the patience
Yes.
to try to really like go to the original source. I try to do that whenever I can. It's not something that you're going to sit down and read on a rainy afternoon and say, "Hey, that was great." It's something you really want to study. But I do often feel called to pick that up again this time of year, and that just takes you deeper into the time at which these festivals were celebrated, and the deep meaning behind them, and it just helps to pull you back in time to that era where um, this was how they lived, and these are the stories that they lived by. And I just find that to be one of the most magical things, to really go back and spend some time in ancient Wales and Britain.
Yeah, and I think it's a really lovely idea to just do some kind of ritual. I was really kind of inspired reading the Farrer book, and they were talking about their ritual is based around sort of the concept of the corn harvest and
Yeah.
using that as a centerpiece. And they said something really lovely. They said, first of all, that this was associated with the time of the Eleusinian mysteries, which we don't know much about. But according to them, this is a quote from their book, The Fars, the climax is said to have been the showing to the initiate of a single ear of grain, with the adamation in silence is the seed of wisdom gained. I thought that is so beautiful. I mean,
That's
just
gorgeous.
it's
Yeah.
like to meditate on that phrase and really, and then thinking of corn and harvest and it's, I love that about the pagan cultures, that connection to nature and really pausing to reflect on what it can mean on a deeper level. And I think that even if you just did that, it could produce something.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that so much. And that's one of the things that, you know, this path feels so organic. It's just so everything is connected. You know, you've got this ear of corn that, that you may have planted that seed yourself and watched it grow. And now, now you're harvesting it. You can be grateful for the work that you did, for the abundance that it provided, all on a very physical level. But then there's this deeper meaning behind it. And then you've got the more cosmic meaning of, what's happening in the skies and what's happening with the planets. And it's all so beautifully woven together. I love that so much. For me, I tend to really celebrate with apples this at the equinox, because this is traditionally the time when the apple harvest is starting to come in. And it's such a symbol of wholeness to me. But we all know, when you cut that apple down the middle, there's the pentagram. And it reminds me every time I eat an apple, every time it reminds me of that connection to the divine feminine, to spiritual nourishment, and also to, watching enjoying the fruits of your labors. It's just a beautiful symbol of this time for me too.
So it's a practice of gratitude on some
Yeah,
level.
definitely, definitely. Yeah, and taking stock. What do we have? What do we need? Being grateful for what we have in order to create an environment where more abundance can come in. That sort of thing. It's not the final harvest yet. There's still more work to do, but look at all we have, and how beautiful that we did this, we created this. And that can be a project that you're working on. In our modern world, we're not all out there harvesting our crops. But it can certainly be, in your little garden in the backyard, like look at all the, look at all the zucchini that came up this year. And, so it really is a time to appreciate all the work and the intention and the cultivating and the care that you've put into whatever it is, and celebrating that at this time.
I think too, because of the pandemic, one of the things I've noticed, a lot of my friends started growing their own food in the city, in places wherever they could find, and they all are very proud of the, I grew a tomato plant this year, and they were all showing it. So perhaps this is a particularly good time to make it earthy, to really remember the earth and really celebrate in that way as part of, even if we don't, obviously I'm not a farmer. I don't even garden. So, but I thought I really liked that idea of making it kind of an earthy celebration this year.
I love that too. Yeah, because it's provided. I would be willing to bet that a lot of people who never tried to grow a tomato in their life tried this year. And the satisfaction that you get from seeing, like, I did that, I grew that, and now I'm eating it for dinner, and it's like amazing. Whereas our ancestors, this is how they lived every single day. And they had to store what they could, and they had to, this was about survival. So of course they were extremely grateful for every single, blackberry that came off that vine, every single tomato, every single apple that came from the tree. And I think in, even if we're not gardeners, which I'm not either, I do try, but it's not good. But I think being grateful for any way that you can, you're sourcing sustenance. I know through the whole pandemic, I was having my groceries delivered for quite a while, and I'm saying a little prayer for every single person that brought me groceries, that put themselves at risk to bring my food to my home. No, I didn't grow it, but I was lucky enough to be able to partake of that. And I'm very grateful to all the people who were doing that. So yeah, I think there's ways in our modern world that we can recognize these things, without having to be farmers or out there in our backyard gardens.
And what's also nice about the equinox in terms of a celebration, there's no real politics around it. There's, certain celebrations, there's just so much, history and
Yeah.
politics. And even if you have a nice relationship with it, maybe it's not good for another group. And when you think about, well, really the equinoxes, can you really think of anything that negative? I can't actually. I
I
said so. This
can't
is kind of a
either.
clean holiday.
Yes. And it's funny when you said that, it just made me think, well, yeah, it's like this balance. Nobody really it's not leaning one way or another. It's not, for this and against. It's just what it is. It's the midpoint of, light and dark. It's the midpoint of the seasons, the change of seasons and all of that. So yeah, it's like it's neutral. It's like Switzerland. Everyone can enjoy it.
Everyone can enjoy it, exactly. And so what do you think, kind of jumping ahead, is the difference between the 2 equinoxes then, the spring and the autumn? I mean, obviously the light's growing on the other end, but like, more magically speaking, what do you think is the difference?
Ooh, I think so. So there is that sort of, I look at each of those times as sort of, they mark the beginning of a new phase of the year. So, right now it marks the beginning of fall, which is personally my favorite season. And I love this time of year. So it's magical to me in that way, that it's like, okay, it's opening me to exploring my inner darkness and exploring what treasures I can find in there. When you get to the spring equinox, that feels like an emergence, um, going into the light, coming out and bringing the light that you have found in the darker half of the year and bringing that out, um, into your life. So um, it's funny, they're very, similar in terms of that balance of light and dark, but they feel different. Um, and so yeah, I would say there's a depth and there's a drawing inward, at this equinox, and then there's an emergence and a sort of flowering, um, in the spring equinox.
I like that. That's perfect. That's exactly right. So before we get to the end of the show, I wanted to talk a little bit about what you do, and one of the things, you teach online courses through the Mystery School of the Goddess. And why don't you share a little bit about that?
Oh, that's been so fun. So I just started, offering courses with them, around this time last year, actually. So this is another. My first course that I offered was, and it's still there. It's a free course about, Morgan Le Fay. It's a little mini course. There's, history and legend and lore about her. There's a guided meditation in there, and she is. I adore her. I walk with her. She walks with me. So that was a wonderful, way to sort of get started. And then, I offered a Celtic Almanac course, which is actually wrapping up at the end of this month. It's a year-long course, and each month we explore a different goddess in the Celtic and Avalonian worlds. There's ritual, there's meditations, there's, journal exercises, all things like that. I am actually going to package that up as an ebook so that people can do it at their own pace. So that will be available. I am really hoping in October,
Hmm.
if I can make that happen. And I also taught a course. It actually started right after we went on lockdown here, just after the spring equinox as well, which is Into the Heart of Avalon, which explores all the different, spiritual paths that converge, there. So there's the more esoteric Christian path in terms of, the Grail mysteries and Mary Magdalene and Jesus. There is obviously the whole Celtic and Avalonian connection as well. I go into the different archetypes of the beings there. And we talk about Glastonbury and Avalon, as sort of two sides of, Glastonbury, England being the earthly version of Avalon, which exists just on the other side of the veil there. So that I'm also going to be turning into an ebook so that it will be available. I'm launching a website, which is going to happen next month. So I will be able to put those books and other teachings up there. I'm working on creating a community as well that I'm going to launch next year, early next year, which is really going to be around you're tapping into your own creative magic and with the aid of the Celtic muses. So the Celts didn't have muses per se, but their gods and goddesses were very involved, many of them in different and connected with different aspects of arts, artistry, writing, craftsmanship, all of that. And so each month we'll be taking a look at a different Celtic muse from that perspective and how that can inform our own creative projects or just, creative problem solving in our everyday lives. So that's coming soon next year.
Wow, you had a lot on the go there.
Thank you. Sometimes I think, what am I doing? It's so much, but I love it. So
do you have your website address yet?
It will be CaireannFrasca.com when it's up and running. So
is it K-A-R or the C-A-I-R?
I'm doing the K-A-R-E-N spelling of my name because I'm going to be broadening my offerings so that I can include more. Obviously, Celtic and Avalonian mysteries are always close to my heart and at the root of many things that I do, but I'm going to be offering some other interesting things that don't necessarily connect with those paths. So I figured I'd go back to my old original moniker.
And are you still doing readings for people?
I am, yeah. So I'm doing I do a half-hour session. It's a spread that I created based on the Celtic Trinity knot. And that is really good for like a targeted, if you've got a specific issue you want to get some insight on, that's a really good one. And then I also created a spread that is a Cauldron Spread. And that is a 9-card in-depth reading where we really look at a specific situation or just generally what's happening in life, looking at what led to where we are now, getting into where the present situation, and then how we can then emerge in the direction that they want to go. So that's an hour long and really more of an in-depth reading. So those are really, all of the readings are really fun to do, and I really enjoy doing that.
Do you have a specific deck you like to use?
Yeah, there's I have there's a Celtic Blessing Oracle deck, which I love. And that I use to wrap up. So when I'm finished with the reading, just to sort of sum up, and give a general, like, here's the quick snapshot of what we talked about. It's wonderful for that. And then for the readings, I usually use the Mists of Avalon deck, which is absolutely gorgeous. It came out not too long ago. I think it was this year. And artwork's beautiful. And it's a powerful deck. I love it. I love working with that one.
Have you ever seen the Courtney Davis deck?
No, but I know his art.
Yeah, it's out of print. You might be able to get it, but you can see it visually. And it's beautiful. It's gorgeous. I don't know why it went out of print. I mean, it's one of the most, if you like any kind of the the Celtic knots and the real Irish artwork. It's all based on that. It's just,
Yes.
really just to lay them down and look at them. It's beautiful.
Yes.
So I used to use it until I found out it was out of print, and now I
Oh,
don't. I don't want to, because it's out of print. But it might come back. These things come and go with cards.
yeah, that's true. I'll have to check that out. I love his artwork.
Yeah, you'll definitely, and sometimes you can find those decks. If you just, one of the things I found with out of print esoteric things, one time I spent 2 years finding an out of print book that was reasonable for being out of print, and I found it. It's just, some little place will have it, and they don't
Yeah.
want gobs of money. So you gotta, be patient sometimes. So oftentimes you
right.
can find it, but it's definitely one I think if you like his artwork, then you're gonna love the deck, and it's
Oh,
all based
yeah.
on, it's got Arthurian characters in it, and
Oh boy,
and
I'm
it
on the hunt now.
I can. I mean, the thing about the tarot that sometimes people forget, it is also art, and it was meant to be
Yes.
art, and that's a huge part of the art of tarot is art as art.
Mhm.
And so it's great to see beautiful art, even if it's something, you can read with that deck, but sometimes you can't read with the decks. Like someone did a Blake deck, and it's just too hard to read with, but it's beautiful,
I can imagine. Yeah.
based on his art. But maybe going back to our we're getting closer to the end here, and maybe if there's any sort of thoughts you have that you'd like to finish the show up with about the equinox or your own experiences with it, and just to share with our audience.
Hmm. Yeah, I think I what's coming up is just really, this year, if we've been lucky enough to avoid some of the worst of the things that have happened, it's been one for the record books this year, as we all know. And I think that what really is coming up for me this year is just deep, deep gratitude that, um, for all that I'm lucky enough to have, for all the people in my life that, are healthy and safe and, all of that. Um, I really am feeling a deep level of gratitude. And I would encourage everybody to really sit down and think it can feel, you know, people have lost jobs, people have lost loved ones. There's been so much unrest and violence and everything else. But take some time this year to really think about what you have, and the blessings that you do have, and just try to be in that energy. I think that it would be very easy this year to just feel hopeless and feel like, things are never going to get better and it's just awful and there's no light at the end of the tunnel. There is. And the way that we can sort of bring that in, in a speedy way, hopefully, is if we all really appreciate everything that we do have, and put that energy out there of, let's create more of what's good and let's stop focusing so much on, everything that has gone wrong. Again, it's easy for me to say that. It's not so easy when you've lost a lot, but I would argue that, staying in a place of resentment or anger or, depression, get the help that you need, to try to kind of come out of that. There's a purpose for the darkness, but there's light in there, and the more we can connect with that light, and bringing that out of ourselves and into the world, I think the better off we're going to be in the short and the long term. We can't create from a place where we're feeling like despair and lack um, and rage. Um, so yeah, I would encourage everybody to try to find the good, find the positive, find the light. Um, and if you're in the dark, really be in it, really explore, really see what treasures are in there for you. And you can't really go wrong when you allow yourself to be in your feelings.
That was so beautiful. I almost feel like crying.
Aw.
You're right. It's time to take a pause. We don't have to stay there, but you're right. And that was really beautiful, and I think really connected. So thank you for that, and thank you for coming on the show again. We enjoyed having you so much.
Thank you so much. I loved every minute. It was wonderful.
Awesome.
And a happy equinox to you.
And you too as well.
Thank you.
And thank you all for listening again. And we hope you have a beautiful equinox. And we will see you next time as we continue to journey and learn about the esoteric and the obscure together. Take care.